What exactly is formative assessment? There are lots of ways of defining it, but the way that my colleagues and I have found most helpful over the years is to think about three processes: where the learner is right now, where they're going, and how to get there. And to think about the learner, the teacher, and the learner's peers in the classroom. And if you cross those two dimensions, you get 9 cells, which we think can be usefully grouped into 5 strategies of formative assessment. The first strategy is clarifying, sharing, and understanding learning intentions and success criteria. You need to be clear about where you're going. Now, the important point here is the teacher needs to be clear about where the learning is headed, but whether you share it with the students, and if so, at what point, is a different issue. Sometimes it might be worth starting with the learning intention. Sometimes it might be better to start with an engaging activity. So the starting point is the teacher needs to be clear about where the learning is going, because that's how you design your teaching. You design your teaching with clear learning intentions in mind. The trouble is, you can't measure learning in a lesson. Learning is a long-term change in what students can do. That's where success criteria come in. Success criteria are a kind of, I'll be happy if. In other words, I'll be happy if by the end of today's lesson, every child can subtract one 3-digit number from another 3-digit number, regrouping at least once. So learning intentions are for teachers, and they're primarily useful for planning. Success criteria are primarily useful for both teachers and students. They tell you how to evaluate whether the lesson went according to plan. Doesn't guarantee the learning has taken place, but at least you now know pretty clearly that the lesson went according to plan. Then we elicit evidence. We find out where the students are. Some people call it questioning, but the trouble with the word questioning is that it really narrows things down. First of all, sometimes you get more out of students by making statements, but art teachers, music teachers, drama teachers, dance teachers, they don't ask many questions, they observe. And so this idea of eliciting evidence as a strategy is this set of all the things that teachers do to find out where students are in their learning. And once you know where students are in their learning, then of course you feedback. And the trouble with the word feedback is people fixate on the last 4 letters, B-A-C-K. Feedback is not the view through the rearview mirror. It's the view through the windscreen. It's about what's next. Or as Douglas Reeves once famously pointed out, it's like the difference between getting a medical and a post-mortem. And the trouble is, too many of our students get post-mortems rather than medicals. And the really key point here is, the purpose of feedback is not to improve the work the student handed in. The main purpose of feedback is to improve the learner, to help them do a better job at some point in the future on a similar task they have not yet attempted. As Rick Stiggins has pointed out, however, this is not enough to complete the picture, because he points out that the most important decisions taken in classrooms are not taken by teachers, they're taken by students. Doesn't matter how good your feedback is, if your students have no desire to learn, you're wasting your time. So we have to activate students as learning resources for one another and as owners of their own learning. And in many ways, this last strategy is the most important. It's where all the others lead. Let me illustrate. I'm often asked to observe teachers teach lessons. And if I watch a teacher teach a lesson, I can guarantee that the first thing that teacher will ask me is, how did I do? To which I now say, how do you think you did? I'm not doing that to dodge the question. I'm doing that because if that teacher can give me a good answer, my work here is done. That teacher knows what she needs to do to get better. She is well on the way to becoming, in the psychological jargon, a self-regulating learner. So the best way to think about all these formative assessment strategies is they all lead towards empowering learners to look after their own learning more effectively. The main purpose of feedback is to work towards its own redundancy, is to equip the learners with the skills that they need to manage their own learning more effectively. There'll always be a role for feedback from somebody outside, but the point is, if we think of the purpose of these 5 formative assessment strategies as empowering learners to take greater control of their own learning, then we won't go too far wrong.